My next guest is Dr. Richard Bernato. He is entering his 53rd year in schooling that spans higher education, research, doctoral, and graduate levels in Stony Brook, St. John's University, Molloy University, and CUNY Queens College, many K-12 leadership roles in consulting with presenting to many school districts. His interests include catalyzing interactive and research-based effective curricula that are a result of futurizing systems, planning, decision making, and a high engagement of all stakeholders to ensure systematically healthy schooling and organizational practices. His latest book, Co-Creating the Future, a simulation to catalyze school change, Solution Tree, is a unique offering to those interested in innovative professional development principles and planning. His books, Future-Based Change Leadership, Planning is Futuring is Planning, also capture those ideas. He is also the co-author of The Collective Mindset and blogs, podcasts, and writes articles that are devoted to that vision. An expert on the uses of and how to design simulations for learning and organizational improvement, Dr. Bernato supports all efforts to reform schools for futures they have yet to consider and supports these through his efforts as editor-in-chief of the Scope Journal for Leadership and Instruction. Well, welcome to the podcast, Richard.
Thank you very much. Wow, that was a wordy bio that I wrote.
Yeah, you've done a lot, and a lot of what you do is very unique. So we'll dive into the conversation. But first of all, I wanted to ask you, tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Well, goes back right back to way before you were born. My very first year of teaching, I'm not going to say the year, but it was quite a while ago. I was a social studies teacher coming out of the New York City and out here which was then a kind of a more rural than suburban district it is now. And I thought I was John Dewey. I
Yeah.
was teaching social studies, and I really was very proud of myself. I pretty much thought I had it all figured out. My principal came in to observe me, I guess about a month into my beginning year, and I was teaching about the Iroquois Indians, which here on Long Island, New York, is an important, in quotes, important topic as a prelude to Native Americans in general. And I was working straight out of the textbook and just asking Johnny to read a paragraph and then explaining what Johnny just read, and just kind of humdrum Little
Yeah.
House on the Prairie teaching. And I thought it went very well. The lesson ends, and I'm waiting for. Can I do two stories real quick? All right, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So the lesson ends, and I'm pretty proud of myself. The students were standing on chairs, raising their hands, and all sorts of good
Mhm.
things. And I thought I had gotten some nice engagement. And the principal said to me, "You don't know much about the Iroquois, do you?"
Mhm.
Shocked, the color drained from my face.
Yeah.
I said, I'm working from the text," and he said, and he just basically poo-pooed me away and said, "He's Rich." He says, students learn best when they're engaged and actively participating in what you're all about." And the signal I took from that, first of all, I agreed with him, number one. And number two was I realized that I didn't know how to do those things very well at the time. And number three was that I didn't know if it was even something that I thought I was going to lose my job, quite
Sure.
frank. And I didn't want to lose my job. So I kind of ground down and devoted myself to really working on those teaching tenets pretty well. And it really sounds like a fatalistic way to put it. I really drank his Kool-Aid, not
Yeah.
because I was so much afraid of keeping my job so much as that. So, and I got pretty good at it pretty quickly. And a couple of years later, uh, maybe about 2 or 3 years later, before I had tenure too, which looking back was an interesting piece to this conversation, the social studies chair came in to observe me.
Okay.
Now, I knew he was coming on date X to time Y. And what I had done was I had taken I know you're an English teacher, so I had found a novel called Rabble in Arms by Oliver Wiswell. I'm
Mhm.
sorry, I forgot the author's name. It wasn't Oliver Wiswell. The title was Rabble in Arms. It was about the Tories and the Patriots in the Revolution. And
Mhm.
there was a chapter in that book where uh, a young patriot saves a Tory from being tarred and feathered.
Hmm.
And we fast forwarded to the end of the war, and now the Patriots have thrown the British out. And what we did was we created a trial, say that his name was Oliver Wiswell, to say whether he should be put on trial for treason for saving the Tory.
Hmm.
So I set up a trial. I had assigned a judge. I assigned witnesses from the novel. Uh, we practiced a couple of. We had attorneys create their own questions. Everything. I pretty much sat back and gave the class a couple of days to prepare,
Hmm.
and we started. And we in walks the chairperson, and in and I looked at the student who was dressed as a judge. Who was seventh graders, and uh, set them loose. I don't think I said 5 words, except to say this is what the definition of treason is.
Okay.
I put that on the board and then I set them loose. And they went through the entire trial, called their witnesses, cross-examined, opening statements, closing statements, just like something you see on television. And then with about 6 minutes left, the trial was over. And then when the kids who had not played a role were put in a circle and they were the jury, and if I'm not mistaken, they found Oliver was, well, innocent.
Hmm.
Bell rings. Bang. The bell rings. Kids get up and walk out. And now I'm really sure that I am in doubt, in no doubt, uh, the real John Dewey. I reincarnated. I am, the answer to everybody's prayers. Now, I'm not going to quote exactly what the chair said, but you can get the drift of it.
Yeah.
Basically, he said to me, you teach like this often. And I said, oh, yeah, every day, something like this.
Okay.
Relation, role play, debates, this kind of thing. Uh, and he said, and again, I'm fast forwarding and I'm not giving you with the words he used, but he did say, this is all Madison Avenue flim flam.
Yeah.
And it's a total waste of time, and the students didn't learn it a darn thing.
Hmm.
And I was, again, this time I'm flawed, but this time I know I'm right and he's wrong. And he's the chair, and I don't care if he's the chair. And I really kind of lit into him a bit,
Yeah.
to the point that principal came up later on. I said, "What did you say to him?" So I said, "I did what you had taught me how to do. I was
Yeah.
doing it. In fact, I can't write a better lesson than I couldn't script it any more than
Hmm.
the way these kids just pulled it all together of their own." And we went back and forth a little bit. And finally, the chairperson relented. But it talked about coming out of the trenches. I was never so convinced that I had at least a good piece of the answer. I've since realized that role play and simulation and active learning like that would wear any teacher out over 180 days worth of school unless you varied it up, as I'm sure you know, and all the listeners may
Yeah.
know. But those are two things where that got me out of the trenches and up charging the machine gun nest on the other side.
Sure, sure. And I think a lot of the time at the beginning of one's career, we're trying out things. And I think the mock trial is definitely something a lot of social studies and English and other subject area teachers still use today. And, sometimes we do have people who disagree with us. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not, right? But I think charging forward and doing what you think is best is definitely kept you in education. So, you're on the podcast to discuss a few books. We'll talk about your most recent publication from 2024, Co-Creating the Future, a Simulation to Catalyze School Change. So, tell me a little bit about what's it about, and then also what people can learn from it.
Yeah, I felt. I'll tell you first of all that the publisher didn't want it to use my title. My
Okay.
title is Alchemy,
Uh-huh.
and they I still don't exactly understand why they didn't want to use it, but they're the publisher and they published the book, so I relented because really what the book is about alchemy and that word that it suggests, which would be transformation. I don't like the word transformation so
Hmm.
much because it's so overused that we don't really know what it means all that much. So I try to avoid using it, although I probably use it in our conversation today, uh, sparingly, but I will use it because in the end, transformation is about new ways to realize. And so I always see the role of a leader, and maybe even more so when we talk about teachers and educators, educational staff and stakeholders engage with each other to catalyze each other.
Hmm.
Catalyze is actually probably my favorite word, although it's a couple of other C words that go with that, like collaboration and culture and
Okay.
communication. They're all part of what that's all about. And as we discussed the last time we had met, uh, I sometimes get the feeling, now I've been a principal, first years of my professional life probably were being a principal. I'm a professor now, have been almost as long as I was teaching in K-12 world, uh, and have been in many different administrative roles as the bio read out. But in the end, I always felt the same thing, that it was the leader's job to not only to empower passive people
Hmm.
who, by nature of what their of the expectations that are continuously laid on all educators, even more so nowadays, it seems that the more passive that they feel because of how beset they might feel by how the expectations seem to be heaping up on them, the more nearly they have to find ways, either find ways of their own or hopefully with their leaders to co-empower each other.
Hmm.
And to my mind, it's a responsibility. It's the first responsibility of a good leader, whether you're running a Boy Scout troop or you're running a government or if you're running a building, a school, to give people the skills, have them practice the skills that are innate to them, uh, to uh, rip the scales from that so that they can really excite each other and motivate each other to get past how they perceive things may be, so that they can co-create the future. Now, the book is about that in a sense because it's a professional development book. Do a lot of that nowadays, and it's a simulation. For those people who don't know, a simulation is a role play within a game.
Hmm.
It's not as though I say, okay, Dana, you play Goldilocks and I'll play the Papa Bear and we'll pretend we're talking to each other. That's a role play. A simulation has a more structure to it than that. A simulation has game-ing rules uh, and processes that are built in so that you can, the roles that people play and take enable them to more often than not collaborate, sometimes conflict with each other too, depending on what the situation is, so that they can uh, co-create so they can create something new that hasn't been there before
Hmm.
to make the premise happen. So this particular simulation is a simulation of district and school leaders and stakeholders, union people, students, PTA folks, business people, all the folks who comprise the universe that we talk about schooling, where they have to negotiate with each other and collaborate and sometimes differ with each other to use certain specific, what I call futures forecasting skills.
Okay.
And the three kinds of futures that go with that, and they quickly internalize that. I call them the three Ps. I didn't make up the premise, but I call them the three Ps, which stands for what's possible. It's possible pigs can fly. It's possible that students can take over a school. It's
Hmm.
not likely, but it's possible in both cases, believe it or not, if you look it up in terms of genetic studies. Uh, what's probable, I'm shouting for emphasis, all those things in the middle, like, that could happen if then, those things could happen. And the third piece is what's preferable,
Hmm.
what you want. And what you want is an outgrowth of what's probable. What happens often enough is we come back to that passivity thing, especially if you just came out of this, where we talk about the COVID crisis that we're still uh, somewhat shell shocked from, I think, is that what we need to consider is, well, it's probably true that ABC will happen. Now you have to decide whether you're okay with that or not.
Hmm.
Will you accept it? Will you accept the difference, the gap between what's probably seems to be happening? Otto Scharmer says, calls that the emerging future.
Hmm.
What seems to be emerging versus what you want. And if there's a gap between those two things, do you accept what's going to happen and lay down a little steamroller, just flatten you? Or do you say, no, I want to take charge of this and do what I can to uh, tinker with it, if nothing else, if not totally, here comes the word again, transform to something different. Uh, there are skill sets. They're mostly out of the business world, and the book teaches those things to each role, ROLE. So one person may be the futurist, another person might be the collaborative leader, another person may be the systems expert,
Hmm.
and they contribute these sets of skills to, another word I don't like, synthesize into something new. And the act of the experiences
Hmm.
uh, enables them to realize that they can, in fact, do things that will recreate, restructure, eliminate what the probable future seems to be like or not. I'm talking too much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about with the simulation. Give me an example about maybe in the real world outside of education where they do a lot of these simulations where they're kind of looking at systems.
Oh, without a doubt. Well, first of all, the simulation, I was actually a mentor of a student, a nursing student, who did a dissertation on simulations, and they're constantly simulating all kinds of situations that they think they need to do to
Okay.
rehearse against the whatever emergencies they may participate in. I guess another word to use, the word I kind of enjoy using once in a while, is think tank.
Okay.
Corporations have think tanks. You
Yeah.
have people who do what ifs and know what they have and try to anticipate what the probable futures may be. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment in a different way. Uh, it's kind of scary to say this, but I think everyone will realize I'm probably being accurate. And I would think that the Pentagon has a simulation for most any event. You hope they do anyway.
Yeah.
Uh, so that one of those heaven forbids kicks up, then they have a system in place, or systems in place, plans in place to respond to it, if not eliminate it before it even happens. Uh, just this morning, I was driving from X to Y, and I was listening to a podcast about Disney World,
Hmm.
mostly Disney World. And the subject was, how would the Disney World Corporation deal with a recession? And it was an economist talking about how the signs are that seeing the possibility, not necessarily a probability, but a possibility of a recession in our own country.
Yeah.
The last quarter, economically speaking, was reflective of that trend, as an
Hmm.
example. And a big, huge corporation like Disney uh, has has simulated all sorts of scenarios where they will know what they will do, and they are doing some of those things now, in order to minimize the effects of the recession.
Okay.
Uh, every time you're an English teacher, so if you ever put a play on, you rehearse.
Yeah.
That's a simulation. Uh, a simulation is a simplified form of reality. So every toy we ever played with is a simulation of something that is no, we don't. That's less complicated than the real thing. Um, I'm not really very good at them, but most every video game
Yeah.
is a simulation where you decide to kill the dragon and then with the
Yeah.
sword, and then suddenly the dragon eats the sword, and you say, that didn't work. My other plan was to hug the dragon or whichever it was they wanted to do, and new strategies emerged. Those strategies don't happen with students so well because we don't particularly empower students to think that way, let alone do teachers empower themselves to think about ways they can uh, uh, recognize what probabilities are out there. I get in trouble when I say this, but here it is. All right. My strong feeling is that we should have been ready for COVID.
Yeah.
I don't suggest that we knew COVID was coming in February of 2020, but we should have been recognized that some kind of, heaven forbid, some kind of calamity was is always a probability, if not a possibility, or certainly a possibility, but it's often a probability. Uh, I think I mentioned to you the last time I mentioned to a superintendent in a very economically depressed part of New York
Mhm.
State that just before the pandemic hit hard, I said, "What are you going to do about this?" And he said, "Oh, it's never going to hit here. We're out in the boondocks. Nobody cares about us." They
Mm,
never. I said, "They're going to close your schools."
yeah.
And he said, "No, no. Well, even if they do, now hear what he said.
Yeah.
This is a quote. Well, even if they do, all my kids have Chromebooks." So I was encouraged by that. I said, "Really? That's great." And what are they going to do with the Chromebooks? Then he kind of checked himself and said, "Well, most of the kids live in trailers, and very few of the kids have Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
So the Chromebooks aren't really all that worthy because you need Wi-Fi to help you learn." And he says, "I guess I have to come up with a plan." And I'm familiar with some other districts like that. Now there could be, I mean, I'm making up crazy things. The Martians could have invaded. We could have had another kind of pandemic hit
Yeah.
us yet. It could have been a weather event, an earthquake, all the things that we see on the news every day, even a snow day for that matter.
Yeah.
We could have had any number of things out there. How well are we prepared to do that when a lot of students didn't even know what to do with Chromebooks, and a lot of teachers didn't even have any idea what to do with the online approach in the first place.
Yeah.
And so what we were doing was, I didn't make this phrase up, but I kind of like it, is we were flying the plane while we were building it. And the research is showing pretty clearly that the students really were absolute learning losses across the board. In addition to that passivity that you and I spoke about,
Mhm.
because students, when we at least got the electronics working, students sat there and just watched talking heads,
Or they were
like
on
I'm
video
going
games while they were
to,
off camera, right?
or putting up phony faces of themselves. I
Yeah.
saw that a couple of times. So um, and teachers talk a lot like I'm doing now because it's a quick way to instruct. It's not necessarily, it ain't the best way to instruct though.
Yeah. Yeah.
I use ain't on purpose.
Well, I mean, this whole, talk about simulations and I think like scenarios, we do a lot of drills in school, disaster, type drills, but really going through a situation like you're saying the Pentagon would do in case of a national disaster. Yeah, we don't necessarily prepare for those things in schools. And yeah, we know how to like pivot to a virtual day that some districts still do now for a snow day. But, given that this was a massive thing, and like you said, there weren't Wi-Fi hotspots for students, even though they had Chromebooks. So a lot of that was failing. You said in the pre-chat that you're working on a book that's about teachers engaging with students to create a different future. And kind of based on the schools that learn by Senge.
Senge.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, actually, the Senge is built, and again, Peter Senge
Uh-huh.
wrote the fifth discipline, which that's a little long on the tooth now, but it's still a very valuable book for school leaders and for teachers because you begin to recognize the issue of systems.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it actually was a business book, and later on he converted to the book that I often recommend, which is called Schools That Learn, where he took the five parts of systems and showed how different schools were implementing those premises to make their school whole with a W.
Hmm.
Really quickly, the systems he talked about or the subsystems he talks about, the disciplines, I guess is a better way to put it, the shared vision. Now think about your own school. Don't answer this for me, but think between your ears. On those of you watching this, I measure your own school by what I'm about to point out.
Yeah.
What extent is there truly a shared vision in your school?
Hmm.
Don't answer that loud, but just think about it for a minute. To what extent are points of view, mental models, and dispositions actively explored among staff and stakeholders? Not just the party line, but whatever else is going on.
Hmm.
To what extent are teachers taught or encouraged, or stakeholders taught how to learn together?
Hmm.
We've all been on committees, but we all know how many times the committees are a waste of time and all they are teacher talk things because we really don't know how to listen to each other. And to what extent do teachers and stakeholders um, are they empowered to study new things and learn new things in a systematic plan kind of way, or willy-nilly for that matter? And the last one, and again, these are in no order, would be to what extent do they future? Do they systems think? Do they if then?
Yeah.
So this book I'm talking about actually creates a simulation where they can create, they have to use the systems I'm talking about to uh, collaborate, to think future, to decide better, to implement better, and to create more clearly as well. To what extent are teachers encouraged to be creative, especially among each other? And I
Yeah.
can give a
Or
million examples of that.
even if they are being creative, to what extent are they being recognized for their creativity? That's also a question.
Or punished for it.
Yeah.
Sad to say.
Yeah.
I did a dissertation with a fellow a few years ago, talking New York City schools now. Uh, he's at the time he was in charge of all the middle schools in one of the boroughs in New York City, and more specifically to ELL students. And ELL population is exploding all over the country, but New York City certainly uh, has to deal with that trend big time. Uh, and so he studied five of his schools to see whether they had these five disciplines in place.
Hmm.
This is almost too simple to even point out. It showed clearly that the schools that had all five of these premises actively in place were far more successful than the ones that were not. And they had yardsticks for that I won't bore you with. It's as clear as a bell. Happy to say he's now the superintendent of that district, and I hope he remembers what he did in his dissertation.
Hmm.
So those ingredients, those variables have to be there, so the teachers can actually crawl out of those trenches and charge the machine gun nest, which is such an adversarial way to cast it. I know, but to successfully affect their mission, I guess is another way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about the future's forecasting and leadership, because in your mind, there are certain skill sets that not all leaders or even district leaders have, or the dialogues among them aren't being had. Even though we're saying we have this 5 or 10 year plan, we're not looking at like some areas of things that could affect the district, the what ifs, like you said.
Or even some technological developments, as we
Yeah.
spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
Um, my book talks about three levels of futuring. And I
Hmm.
made that word up, I think. So you're an English teacher. I don't know if it's a gerund or a verb,
Uh-huh.
an adjective, but I use it interchangeably. Uh, the first level sounds like it's low level, but it's not. Is information gathering.
Okay.
And the more information you get, you have, the better decision you're going to make. If you don't have all of the decisions in front of you, you make silly decisions. The first one that comes to mind, which is not an educational one, is the first Iraq War. the second Iraq War. I take that back. We were going to take out the weapons of mass destruction from Iraq that didn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't have enough information about that. Other effects came out of it that I guess you can evaluate uh, historically for whatever, but that's a good way to look at it. So it's information gathering, heavy duty information gathering. And now when we talk about technology, we'll come to that in a little bit, I guess, is artificial intelligence now really enables us to get a lot of information. Okay. And we'll come back to that later. So the more information you know about what may be going on in your district, uh, demographics, for example.
Yeah.
Most school leaders are pretty tuned into this. But, if I had 2 hours, I would bore you with 10 examples of this, where they at least have an idea what trends are going on and hopefully preparing for them. And other times when they don't. So the first level is what I call information gathering. The second level, I call that two-dimensional futuring.
Hmm.
That's if then. If you punch me in the nose, then my nose bleeds.
Yeah.
If you don't teach characterization in a novel, then they can't use it in the next novel they read. If you don't teach division and which I still can't do, dividing by fractions,
Yeah.
then you can't multiply play by fraction, or maybe it's the other way around. So if then, or kind of superficial, the metaphor I usually use is I have a pond and I toss a rock in the middle of the pond, I get ripple effects
Yeah.
on the surface.
Hmm.
And and business has identified, and I've adapted them into the book, several if-then two-dimensional forecasting techniques that you could use as an English teacher, quite frankly, but also can be used by a think tank group regularly, or a school improvement group, or a committee that's been tasked to do some specific issue. Um, One's called Futures Wheels. And it's basically the ripple effect. You throw a rock in the middle of the pond, what are the ripple effects? It's just the same premise. Another one is a little harder to explain. It's called cross impact charts. Sometimes I use the other word, which is matrices, but it sounds too highfalutin. It's a chart. And what you do is think about what you think is most probably going to happen, and then you try to identify what the how this probable future might affect what might be the effect on different groups or ideas.
Okay.
So you say union, you say board president, you say teaching staff, you say the community. I'll give you a quick example. I had a school improvement group which actually won some prizes for its decision strengths quite a few years ago, and we were going to put a science fair in place. I was an elementary principal at the time, and I asked one of the teachers to take charge of it, and she was glad to do that. And she came in with a plan that she had worked up with some other teachers. Again, that co-empowerment premise.
Hmm.
And she walked it into the school improvement committee. Now, on my school improvement committee was the head custodian. And here's Pam, you're going forward. This is date X, Y, Z. We're going to do this and that. And we're going to bring in a spokesperson, and kids will be demonstrating their work and so forth. And the custodian kept doing this, turning his head from side to side. He was kind of a crank anyway. Usually, most people didn't want to pay attention to him.
Hmm.
God forgive me for saying that. So I looked over to him. I said, "What got a problem with that, John?" And he says, "Yeah." I said, "What's going on?" He says, "It ain't going to work." I said, "Why not?" He says, "You know how many outlets I need for that?
Hmm.
200 kids plugging things in will blow the whole school up." So I scratched my bald head and I said, "Well, we didn't think of that. We didn't think of that future." Now, if you think about that as a cross impact matrix, you can see how that ripples across. If you think about that pond I was talking about, which at one time was Walden Pond and was beautiful, had lily pads and frogs hopping around and fish eating the insects, and all the systems of the pond were in balance with each other. And
Hmm.
then how many years later, when suddenly somebody began to run water from their kitchen sink, and with pesticides or whichever, they go into the pond. Suddenly, the pond's systems are out of whack because the impact had not been calculated.
Okay.
So and you can use that in novel teaching. I
Yeah.
promise you, I send you your money back if it doesn't work. Then the third dimension, and you already used the word, I forgot to mention it before, is three-dimensional. The three-dimensional futuring is simulation.
Hmm.
It's got multiple levels. The interactions are much more varied, and the outcomes aren't necessarily so clear until
Yeah.
you bring it to the end. So you can use simulation. Another three-dimensional process, a little similar to that, is scenario building.
Hmm.
So into this particular simulation in this last book I'm talking about, um, that's their job. Their job is to write simulations. I'm sorry, to write scenarios. Some of them are uh, good things, some of them are mixed with bad things, some of them are good, good, some of them are bad, good. And then we try to figure out which of those outcomes is what we prefer.
Hmm.
And then we go from there. And then we talk about action design that goes with that. So there's three dimensions: information gathering, two-dimensional is the middle one. That's where the probables kick in. And that's more important than anything else, actually, than even the preferables, because first you have to get that basket assembled. And then the third piece is preferables, is three-dimensional futuring.
Hmm.
And we do that. You know, when someone says to you, "Oh, by the way, we're going to shorten the periods next week because of an assembly we're going to be doing," someone's futured for that and had enough sense to shorten the periods so everybody has a chance to teach their students. And
Hmm.
it's not a silly example, but it's a quick fix answer to an issue that comes up all the time. I'm talking too much again, Dana.
Well, I think we've got a good idea now about some of the simulations that you talked about and how we can use those in schools, and also when working with stakeholders and planning for outcome scenarios. Um, how do you use some of your experience in K-12 as a teacher, admin, and assistant superintendent when you're doing trainings and workshops for principals?
I usually come in, but I do it one of two ways. Uh, One way is sort of out of the can. I guess you could call that inorganic, and the other way
Okay.
would be organic.
Yeah.
The inorganic way would be I walk in with my toolkit, and I drop them into the scenario that initiates the simulation I've been talking about. It's very comprehensive. It doesn't really miss a trick in any school district, whether they're prize winning or whether they're hurting badly. Uh, and then I put them in the roles that I've mentioned already and teach them the skills that they need to have in order to negotiate with each other, vote with each other, vote
Yeah.
against each other, collaborate with each other. And then as the facilitator, I call myself the catalyst rather than the facilitator, uh, steer them one way or another in terms of just clarifying for them what they need to do so they can get finally to uh, a an inorganic scenario
Okay.
that's based on having the artificiality of the book. The more preferable way, but takes more time, but it's more preferable ways from when I come in and I talk to a set of stakeholders, you know, starting with the bosses, superintendents or principals, but often with teachers too, or with the whole community for that matter. And we build the opening scenario together.
Okay.
I don't know the name of your district, so you're Colorado Junior High School, and uh, your district has some issues that are concerning absenteeism or poverty issues or all combinations of all the things that you have to contend with. And now we'll co-write the simulation. I'm sorry, the
Okay.
scenario, and then I turn around and then I will take the actual superintendent and make him the superintendent in the simulation, or maybe not, depending on how things evolve. I may make you the teacher union president,
Hmm.
for example, and so forth. As they divide up these given roles I spoke about, there's five. There's collaboration. Oh, I should say there's two teams. There's an outside team, the world out there team. That's the community mostly. And then there's the internal team, the school leadership team. And they're not at war with each other, but they have different sets of agendas, as
Yeah.
everyone is well aware. So they have to find ways to work with each other as well as work against each other in some senses. They'll figure that out on their own, given how they created their own scenario. And then I walk them through it. And we get to the end when they finally pick the scenario that they want, whether it's do nothing and accept the reality that's emerging in front of them, or whether it's um, something altogether different and radical for that matter, which I often personally advocate. Uh, then we'll turn around and say, okay, well, let's put it in motion. And then we'll design what I call an organic action design system that's in the book as well
Okay.
that enables them to create a flexible system change. Remember a few minutes ago, you said a 5 or 10 year plan. Every district's got a 5 or 10 year plan and nobody knows.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, and what we're really talking about now is ways to throw that one away and come up with a plan that's flexible enough to twist and turn against the emerging futures that may yet be out in front of them that they haven't seen. And the nice thing about this is that, and I'm working on this with a professor friend of mine, uh, uh, is the AI premise.
Yeah.
I'm hesitant to say this, but here it comes. You can tell an AI engine to create a simulation for you.
Yeah.
That scares the living daylights out of me to some extent. But you can do that. You can try it when we hang up here, and you'll see it'll give you a pretty decent forecast depending on the amount of information it's got.
Hmm.
The more information it has, the more likely it's going to give you something pretty good. But uh, what we're doing is we're running a simulation now. We're going to propose it for a book this end of this week, I think, where we're calling it convergence. And you'll see
Hmm.
why. We want the convergence of the technology of artificial intelligence, especially its ability to process and distill information, and welding it with a simulation of people
Hmm.
so that the people can reject what the AI may be forecasting and then giving new scenarios back to the AI for it to continue to process.
Hmm.
So if I'm making this up, so if the AI says your school's going to blow up tomorrow and you don't want that to happen, uh, we'll say we don't like that choice. Here are the two choices we want. Put them together and
Hmm.
tell us what will happen next. So
Hmm.
the simulation is cueing us, CUEING,
Yeah.
but it's not running us. It's
Okay.
it's it's a factor that helps us make our decisions down the line. So that's on my next project, and then I'm going to hang up the spikes and watch the New York Yankees and do whatever and play a little golf, I think.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what will come in your next book and with your work in upcoming years, especially as we tie in the AI. We've had a good conversation around your book, Co-Creating the Future, a simulation to catalyze school change, and how schools can be more ready for an unpredictable future. Out of everything we've talked about today, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
That they have the ability to empower each other.
Mm-hmm.
They can actually encourage each other if they know if provided they have the skill sets to make that happen. And that's up to everyone to teach each other those skills, or it's up to the leader to show them, give them chances to practice it. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's none of us is as smart as all of us is a cute saying, but it's not really true, given how you see some juries and elections go sometimes.
Yeah.
It's more nearly true that as long as we know how to be smart together, that goes back to
Mm-hmm.
Sengate and his team learning premise. We need to learn how to empower and catalyze each other with skills we haven't used. Futuring is one set of skills that's not used with any kind of systematic approach, as I've seen it in my own research,
Mm-hmm.
in school organization and lots of other places as well. So, and I really believe in that too. I put my head on the pillow and think that's what we have to do. We have to get people to recognize they don't have to accept a future they don't like.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, where can people connect with you and find you online?
I'm on a few places. I wouldn't say I'm living on any of them, social media wise, but I do. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm learning how to use LinkedIn better than I have in the past.
Hmm?
I can be contacted through LinkedIn, uh, among other places. I'm also on what they call X nowadays. Not too often, to be quite frank. I'm also on Blue Sky. I forgot to put that on the link
Okay.
I gave you. I'm on Facebook. Um, I think I have a solution tree link too that you can find
Okay.
me in as well. And I will answer. I also have my email. I have no problem if you gave them my email,
I
Dana.
have those, yes.
All right. If I get an email, I will answer it. I
Okay,
will answer.
well, yeah, I'll make sure I put all those links in the show notes. And thank you so much for being my guest on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. It was a great conversation around the forward-thinking, scenario-based leadership that leaders should be moving more into as we approach an unpredictable future.
Well, see, I'm going to make a bumper sticker out of what you just said. That was really good.
Thank you.